I never imagined I'd be standing in the rain at 76, staring at the iron gates of Blackbriar Manor, the home I'd spent 3 decades filling with memories. The eviction notice in my trembling hands bore my son Callum's signature, delivered on Christmas Eve, barely 2 months after we buried his father. 30 years of carefully preserved receipts and documented gifts sat in my vintage Hermès handbag. Matthias's last anniversary, present to me. My son thought he'd inherited an empire, but he'd forgotten who kept the books all these years. They say a mother's love is unconditional, but watching the security cameras track my movement, I wondered, what happens when that love meets betrayal? How does a mother reckon with a child who'd throw her out into the December cold? Before we dive deeper, tell us, where are you watching from? If this story touched you, please subscribe, because tomorrow I have something extra special for you. I suppose I should start from the beginning. Not just the day Callum handed me those papers, but the real beginning. The day I first walked through those gates 48 years ago, when Blackbriar Manor was nothing more than a crumbling Victorian mansion that Matthias's family had barely maintained. I was 28 then, fresh from earning my master's in accounting, and Matthias had just inherited his father's struggling shipping company. We met at a business conference where I was presenting innovative bookkeeping strategies for family enterprises. He sat in the front row, his steel-gray eyes fixed on me throughout my entire presentation. Not on the PowerPoint slides, not on his notebook, just me. "Your methods could save my family's business," he said afterward, over coffee that turned into dinner that turned into a whirlwind romance. Within 6 months, we were married, and I was moving into Blackbriar Manor. The staff, all 3 of them back then, watched with barely concealed skepticism as I dragged my collection of accounting, books and leather-bound ledgers through those gates. The manor needed work, lots of it. The gardens were overgrown, the roof leaked in 17 different places, and the grand staircase creaked so loudly you could hear someone coming from 3 rooms away. But I saw potential in its bones, just as I saw potential in the shipping company's chaotic books. Matthias gave me free rein, with both. While he focused on expanding routes and modernizing the fleet, I transformed our home and the company's finances. Every penny we spent on renovations, every contractor we hired, every antique we purchased, I documented it all. It became a habit, really. Some women collected china or pressed flowers. I collected receipts and maintained immaculate records. Callum was born 2 years later in the newly renovated East Wing Master Suite. I can still remember holding him, this tiny, perfect being, while looking out over the gardens I'd just started replanting. "He'll inherit all of this someday," Matthias said proudly, standing behind me with his hand on my shoulder. "Everything we're building, it'll be his legacy." If only we'd known then how that legacy would turn out. Meredith came along 3 years after Callum. From the start, she was different, questioning, challenging, independent. While Callum shadowed his father in the shipping office, Meredith preferred to sit with me in my study, watching as I balanced books and tracked investments. "Why do you keep everything, Mama?" she'd ask, playing with my collection of rubber stamps and colored tabs. "Because history matters, sweetheart," I'd tell her. "Every transaction tells a story. Every receipt is a memory." She took that lesson to heart, though not in the way we expected. She became an investigative journalist instead of joining the family business, much to Callum's disapproval. The day she announced she was leaving to pursue her career, he called her a traitor to the family name. I should have seen then what he was becoming, but a mother's love can be terribly blind. The years flew by in a blur of expansion and success. Blackbriar shipping grew from a regional operation to an international empire. The manor's gardens flourished under my care, becoming famous enough to be featured in luxury magazines. We added a conservatory, a pool house, a guest wing. Each addition, each improvement, carefully documented in my ever-growing collection of records. Matthias used to tease me about my archival obsession, as he called it. "Rosalind, my love," he'd say, "you're the only person I know who keeps receipts for receipts." But he understood, really. In our world of wealth and privilege, documentation was protection. I'd seen too many family empires crumble because no one kept proper records. When Callum married Isolde, I added a new section to my records. Something about her made me uneasy. Perhaps the way she studied the manor's antiques with calculating eyes, or how she casually mentioned her father's success in hostile takeovers, the gifts we gave them, the downtown penthouse, the yacht, the seed money for Callum's first independent venture. I documented them all with particular care. Wesley, their son, was born in that penthouse 19 years ago. From the start, he was more like his Aunt Meredith than his parents. Artistic, thoughtful, questioning. Isolde was disappointed. She'd wanted a carbon copy of Callum. But I saw in Wesley a depth that his father had never possessed. I taught Wesley about the gardens, showing him how to nurture things into bloom. Patience and attention to detail, I'd tell him. That's what makes things grow. He'd listen intently, sketching the flowers in his ever-present notebook, while Callum and Isolde attended charity galas and board meetings. The first real cracks appeared 5 years ago. Matthias's health began to decline, slowly at first, then with frightening speed. "Parkinson's," the doctor said. Callum immediately began pushing for more control of the company. "Father needs rest," he'd insist at board meetings. "Let me take some of the burden." Matthias resisted at first, but as his hands began to shake too much to sign documents, he gradually ceded control. I watched it happen, documenting everything while maintaining the household and caring for my husband. The power shift was subtle but undeniable. Callum moved his office into the manor's west wing, bringing Isolde with him. They began making changes, small ones at first, then larger. The old staff, some who'd been with us for decades, were gradually replaced with Isolde's choices. Family heirlooms mysteriously migrated to the penthouse. Board members who'd known Matthias for years found themselves eased into retirement. Through it all, I kept my records, adding new entries with a growing sense of foreboding. Matthias passed away 2 months ago. On a crisp October morning, he went peacefully, holding my hand in the same bedroom where we'd welcomed our children into the world. His last words to me were a warning. "Watch the books, my love. Watch them carefully." I didn't understand what he meant until later when I discovered that Callum had been quietly restructuring the company's ownership, transferring assets, and consolidating power. The mansion, our home for nearly 5 decades, had been transferred to a holding company under his exclusive control. The day he served me with eviction papers, it was snowing, the first snow of December. He didn't do it himself, of course. A courier delivered the envelope while Callum and Isolde hosted a business dinner in the formal dining room. I sat in my study, reading the legal documents that declared my home of 48 years a business asset that needed to be liquidated for corporate restructuring. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked to my hidden safe, the one not even Matthias had known about, and began pulling out 5 decades worth of meticulously organized records. Every gift we'd given Callum, every investment we'd made in his name, every piece of property, every education payment, every yacht maintenance bill, all of it documented, notarized, and witnessed. What Callum never understood was that I hadn't just been keeping records. I'd been keeping receipts for a day I prayed would never come. Each document represented not just a transaction, but a thread in a web of legal obligations and conditional transfers. My years of archival obsession had created a paper trail that could unravel his entire empire. That night, as I listened to the dinner party below, I made 3 calls. The first was to Finnegan O'Reilly, our family's lawyer of 40 years who, Callum had recently retired. The second was to Beatrix Vandermeer, my best friend and retired judge. The third was to Meredith, who I hadn't spoken to since Callum forced her out of her inheritance share 3 years ago. "Mother," she answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting for this call." "It's time," I said, watching through my window as Callum's guests departed into the snowy night. "Your brother has finally gone too far." "I'll be on the next flight," she replied. "Don't let him know I'm coming." As I packed my essential belongings that night, the records, some clothes, Matthias's letters and a few precious photos, I thought about all the years I'd spent making this house a home. The gardens I'd cultivated, the memories we'd created, the legacy we'd built. Callum thought he was taking it all away, but he'd forgotten the most important lesson I'd tried to teach him. Everything leaves a paper trail. Wesley appeared at my door as I was closing my suitcase. "Grandmother," he whispered, his artistic soul showing in his worried eyes. "I heard what Father did. I want to help." I hugged him close, this grandson who had more of my spirit than his father ever did. "Keep painting, my dear," I told him, "and keep watching. Your father's about to learn that every garden needs pruning sometimes, even if it hurts." That was 3 days ago. Now I stand in the rain, watching the security cameras track me, holding an envelope that contains not surrender documents, but the first wave of what's to come. Callum thinks he's won, that his elderly mother will quietly disappear into some retirement facility while he dismantles everything we built. But he's forgotten who taught him how to build in the first place. And as I press the intercom button, I smile, thinking of the look that will cross his face when he realizes that sometimes the quietest member of the family can be the most dangerous. The gates begin to open, and I straighten my spine, feeling the weight of my vintage Hermès handbag, the one containing 5 decades of carefully preserved ammunition. It's time to remind my son that every gift comes with strings, every investment has conditions, and a mother's love, while unconditional, is not without consequences. Let him think this is just about an eviction. By the time I'm done, he'll understand that some lessons are taught not with love, but with ledgers. The marble foyer of Blackbriar Manor echoed with my heels as I stepped inside, each click a reminder of how much had changed. The Monet that Matthias and I had purchased on our 30th anniversary was gone, replaced by one of Isolde's modern abstracts, all harsh angles and cold colors. A fitting metaphor, I thought, for what our home had become. Callum's new assistant, a sharp-faced young woman I'd never seen before, intercepted me before I could reach the grand staircase. "Mrs. Blackbriar," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Mr. Blackbriar is in a meeting. Perhaps you could come back. My son will see me now," I interrupted, my voice carrying the weight of decades of authority. "Unless he'd prefer I take this conversation directly to the board of directors." The threat wasn't subtle, but subtlety had lost its usefulness. Through the French doors I could see Isolde in the garden, directing workers who were uprooting my prized heritage roses. My roses, some of them propagated from cuttings that had been in Matthias's family for generations. Each one documented, of course, with receipts for the specialized soil, the careful grafting, the years of maintenance. The assistant's phone buzzed. After a brief conversation, she gestured toward Matthias's old study, now Callum's office. "He'll see you now." I took my time walking there, letting my fingers trail along the wainscoting I'd had restored 40 years ago. Every step was a memory. Here's where Callum took his first steps. There's where Meredith would hide with her books. That's the corner where Wesley would set up his easel to paint. All of it documented, all of it part of the story I was about to tell. Callum stood behind Matthias's antique Chippendale desk, another piece I had carefully documented, looking every inch the corporate titan he imagined himself to be. "Mother," he said, not looking up from his computer. "I assumed the papers were clear enough. The property is being restructured. I've arranged for a lovely apartment in—" "Sit down, Callum," I said, closing the door behind me. "We need to discuss your inheritance." That got his attention. He looked up, finally meeting my eyes. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the little boy who used to run to me with skin knees and broken toys, looking for comfort. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the cold calculations I'd watched grow in him over the years. "There's nothing to discuss," he said. "Father left everything to me. The company, the properties, all of it. The lawyers were very clear." I set my handbag on the desk and began removing documents. "Did you ever wonder, son, why I kept such detailed records all these years? Why I documented every gift, every investment, every piece of property we ever gave you? Your organizational quirks aren't relevant anymore, Mother. Times have changed. The company needs—" "The company," I interrupted, laying out the first set of papers, "needs to remember its foundations. Did you know that every major gift we ever gave you came with conditions? Conditions documented, witnessed, and filed with multiple law firms." He picked up the first document, the deed to his penthouse. His face paled slightly as he read the fine print, the clauses I had insisted on including 20 years ago. "That's not possible," he muttered. "The lawyers would have found—" "Your lawyers found what I wanted them to find," I said, continuing to lay out documents. "Finnegan O'Reilly didn't retire, Callum. You forced him out because he knew too much. But he kept copies of everything, just like I did. The yacht registration, the investment portfolio seed money, the education trust for Wesley. Document after document, each one revealing strings he'd never known existed. I watched as he began to understand, his face growing paler with each revelation. Every major asset you think you own outright," I continued. "Every piece of the empire you're so eager to restructure, it all comes with conditions. Conditions that include proper care and support of family members, maintaining the integrity of the business, and—" I paused, letting the weight of it sink in. "Specific clauses about the treatment of the original property owners." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floors. "This is ridiculous. I'll have my lawyers." "Your lawyers will confirm everything," I said calmly. "Meredith is flying in as we speak. You remember your sister, the investigative journalist you tried to disinherit? She spent the last 3 years building a case about corporate fraud in family businesses. Imagine her surprise when she found such a perfect example in her own family." The mention of Meredith hit him hard. He'd always underestimated his sister, dismissed her career choice as beneath the family dignity. Now that same career could expose everything he'd tried to hide. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice tight with suppressed rage. I want what your father and I spent 50 years building to be preserved, not dismantled for quick profit. I want your sister reinstated in her rightful place in the family. I want Wesley to be free to pursue his own path, not forced into your mold. I stood, gathering the documents back into my bag. And I want my roses left exactly where they are. A knock at the door interrupted us. Isolde entered, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood. She stopped short when she saw the documents spread across the desk, her practiced smile faltering. Darling, she said to Callum, the landscapers are waiting for approval to continue with the garden renovations. Tell them to stop, he said, not taking his eyes off the papers in front of him. Now. Isolde's smile disappeared completely. But the new design, I said stop them, Isolde. Now. She left, closing the door harder than necessary. I allowed myself a small smile, remembering all the times she'd complained about my outdated gardens, never knowing that each rose bush was its own piece of evidence. You've always been clever with numbers, Mother, Callum said, his voice cold. But you're forgetting something. I'm still CEO. The board trusts me. The board, I replied, trusts profits and stability. What do you think will happen to the stock price when Meredith's investigation goes public? When the shareholders learn about the creative accounting you've been using to inflate values? Oh, yes, I added, seeing his surprise. I still review all the books. Old habits die hard. I opened my handbag again and removed one final document, a thick folder bound in blue leather. This contains everything. The original conditions, the documentation of your recent activities, the evidence of financial manipulation. Copies are already with multiple lawyers and trustees. What do you expect me to do? He asked, and for the first time I heard fear in his voice. I expect you to remember who you are, Callum. Not just the CEO, not just the heir, but my son. Your father and I gave you everything. Not so you could destroy it, but so you could build on it, make it better, carry it forward. I stood, smoothing my skirt. You have 24 hours to rescind the eviction notice, reinstate your sister's position in the company, and begin unwinding the more questionable financial arrangements you've made. After that, this folder goes to the board, the SEC, and every major financial publication Meredith has connections with. He slumped in his chair, looking suddenly older. And if I agree? Then we begin rebuilding, as a family, the way your father would have wanted. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Callum. Those roses Isolde wants to remove. Each one was planted to mark a family milestone. The white ones by the fountain. They were planted the day you were born. I have the receipts for those too. As I left the study, I heard him pick up his phone. Cancel all my meetings for the next 24 hours, he said, and get me Finnegan O'Reilly's number. In the foyer, I passed Isolde, who was furiously texting someone. She barely glanced at me, but I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Wesley stood at the top of the stairs, his artist's eyes taking in everything. I gave him a small nod, and he smiled, the same smile Matthias used to have when a particularly complex problem had been solved. Outside, the rain had stopped. The gardens glistened in the afternoon light, the roses standing proud and untouched. I walked among them, touching each one gently, remembering the moments they commemorated. The pink ones for Meredith's birth, the yellow for Wesley's first art show, the deep red for Matthias's last anniversary gift to me. My phone buzzed. A message from Meredith. Landing in 2 hours. Did he fold? "He's thinking about it," I replied. "But the roses are safe." Another message came through, this one from Beatrix. "Finnegan says Callum's office just called. Want me to sit in on the meeting?" "Yes." I wrote back. "Bring the other files. All of them." I sat on the marble bench Matthias had installed for our 40th anniversary. Receipt dated June 15th, documented in volume 23 of my records, and looked up at the mansion that had been my home for nearly half a century. In one of the upper windows, I saw Wesley setting up his easel, angling it to capture the garden in the post-rain light. My phone buzzed again. "Callum. We should talk. Dinner tonight?" "Family dinner," I replied. "Everyone, including your sister." A long pause, then. "Agreed." I smiled, thinking of Matthias's last words to me. "Watch the books, my love." He had known this day might come, had understood that sometimes love means being prepared for the worst, while hoping for the best. A movement caught my eye. The gardeners were packing up their equipment, leaving my roses untouched. Isolde stood at the French doors, watching them leave, her perfect posture rigid with anger. Behind her, I could see Callum in his office, surrounded by the documents I'd left, his head in his hands. Sometimes, I thought, the greatest power lies not in what you do, but in what you've prepared to do. Every receipt, every document, every careful record, they weren't just paper trails. They were protection. Protection for the legacy Matthias and I had built, for the family we'd raised, for the future we'd dreamed of. I pulled out my phone last time, scrolling through years of carefully categorized photos. Callum's graduation, Meredith's first article, Wesley's art show, Matthias in these very gardens, each memory documented, preserved, protected. Tonight we would have dinner as a family. There would be hard conversations, admissions, perhaps even apologies. But we would have them together, surrounded by the roses that marked our history, in the home that held our stories, and every moment would be documented, of course. After all, that's what I do. I am Rosalind Blackbriar, and this is how I saved my family's legacy, one receipt at a time. The family dinner that evening was a masterpiece of tension, served on the same Wedgwood china I'd catalogued in my wedding registry 48 years ago. Meredith arrived exactly on time, her investigative journalist's instincts evident in how she photographed everything, with subtle glances. Wesley had positioned himself at the far end of the table, his sketchbook hidden but ready in his lap. Isolde sat rigid beside Callum, her perfect manicure tapping an anxious rhythm on her water glass. I took my usual place at the head of the table. Matthias's spot remained empty, as it would forever. The silence stretched like pulled taffy, sweet but threatening to snap at any moment. "The roses look lovely in this light," Meredith finally said, her voice carrying years of unspoken accusations. "I'm surprised they're still there, considering the renovation plans I've been hearing about." Isolde's fingers tightened around her glass. "Plans change." "Yes," I agreed, serving the soup. Butternut squash, Matthias's favorite. "They certainly do. Callum, would you like to explain to your sister how the plans have changed?" My son looked older than he had that morning, the weight of revelations evident in the new lines around his eyes. "The renovations are cancelled," he said flatly, "along with several other initiatives." "Including my disinheritance?" Meredith's tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp. "Including that," Callum admitted. "The lawyers are drawing up papers to reinstate your position in the company and your share of the family trust." The soup spoon paused halfway to Isolde's lips. "Darling, we haven't discussed." "There's nothing to discuss," Callum cut her off. "Mother has made certain things very clear." Wesley looked up from his hidden sketchbook, Does this mean grandmother's staying? Your grandmother, Callum said, meeting my eyes across the table. Never really left, did you, Mother? I smiled, remembering the weight of my handbag full of documents. I've always believed in keeping good records, I said mildly. Speaking of which, Isolde, I have the original receipts for that Cartier bracelet you're wearing. The one you told Callum was a family heirloom. Matthias and I purchased it for your 30th birthday. The conditional gift agreement is particularly interesting reading. Isolde's face went pale, then red. She pushed back from the table, but Callum's hand on her arm stopped her. Sit down, he said quietly. We're having a family dinner. The soup was followed by roast duck with cherry sauce, another of Matthias's favorites. I'd instructed the kitchen staff, the ones Isolde hadn't managed to replace yet, to prepare all his preferred dishes. A reminder of the man who'd built this empire that his son had tried to dismantle. I've been working on a new series of articles, Meredith announced, cutting her duck with precise movements, about family businesses and the various ways they can be mismanaged. The research has been fascinating. I'm sure it has, Callum replied. His tone was controlled, but I saw the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his wineglass. Though perhaps we could discuss something else? Why? Meredith pressed. Afraid of what might come out? Like how you've been inflating company valuations? Or maybe the creative accounting with the overseas subsidiaries? That's enough, Isolde snapped. You have no right. Actually, I interrupted, she has every right. As a reinstated board member and major shareholder, Meredith has access to all company records, including the ones you thought you'd hidden, Callum. Wesley's pencil scratched, quietly against his sketchbook. He'd always processed family drama through his art, capturing the subtle tensions and unspoken words in careful lines and shadows. How long have you known? Callum asked me, his voice barely above a whisper. About the financial manipulations, since they began. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I built those accounting systems, trained the staff, established the protocols. Every irregularity left a trace, and I followed each one. Why didn't you say anything? Because, I said, setting down my fork. I wanted to see how far you'd go, whether you'd remember the lessons your father and I taught you about integrity, about building something that lasts. I kept hoping you'd turn back. And when he didn't, Meredith added, you built a case, one document at a time. I nodded. Everything leaves a paper trail, children. That's the first rule of business and of family. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The main course plates were cleared, making way for dessert. Matthias's beloved crème brûlée, served in the Limoges ramekins we'd bought in Paris on our 40th anniversary. Each piece of china, each silver utensil, each crystal glass represented a memory, a purchase, a moment documented and preserved. What happens now? Wesley asked, finally setting aside his sketchbook. The page showed all of us caught in various poses of discomfort and revelation. Callum's slumped shoulders, Isolde's rigid spine, Meredith's watchful gaze. Now, I said, cracking the caramelized sugar with my spoon, we rebuild. Properly this time. Callum will unwind the questionable financial arrangements. Meredith will oversee the process, ensuring everything is done legally and transparently. And you, Wesley, will be free to pursue your art without pressure to join the business. You can't just dictate, Isolde began, but Callum touched her arm again. Yes, she can, he said. The documentation is ironclad. Every gift, every property, every asset, all of it conditional on maintaining the family's integrity. Mother made sure of that decades ago. I learned early in my marriage, I explained, that wealth without documentation is vulnerable. So I documented everything. Every gift we gave, every investment we made, every property we acquired, all with carefully crafted conditions and clauses, a safety net, in case anyone ever forgot what truly matters. The roses, Wesley said suddenly. That's why you keep such detailed records of the gardens. They're not just plants, they're evidence. I smiled at my grandson's insight. Everything tells a story, if you know how to read it. The white roses by the fountain mark your father's birth. The pink ones near the gazebo were planted when Meredith won her first journalism award. The yellow, climbing roses, they celebrate your first gallery showing. And the red ones? Isolde asked, her voice tight. The ones I wanted removed? Those were planted the day Matthias proposed to me. The receipt for the original bushes is dated June 7th, 1964. The soil composition, the grafting records, the maintenance logs, all preserved, just like everything else in this house. Meredith leaned back in her chair, a familiar gleam in her eye. You've been preparing for this for years, haven't you? Building your case, gathering evidence, waiting to see if it would be needed. Mother hopes for the best, but prepares for the worst, I said. I watched as the values your father and I tried to instill were gradually replaced by something colder, more calculating. I saw how the pursuit of profit began to overshadow the importance of family. So yes, I prepared. By keeping receipts, Callum said, a hint of his old sarcasm returning. By keeping proof, I corrected. Proof of every gift, every opportunity, every advantage we gave you. Proof that could either protect our legacy or expose its misuse. The choice was always yours, Callum. Today you finally had to make it. The dessert plates were cleared, and coffee was served in the royal Worcester cups that had been a wedding gift from Matthias's mother. More memories, more documentation, more threads in the tapestry of our family's history. I have conditions of my own, Callum said finally. If we're going to rebuild, I want assurances. Let me guess. Meredith interjected. You want to maintain control? Keep your position as CEO? I want to protect what I've built, too, he insisted. Not everything I've done has been wrong. No, I agreed. Not everything. You've expanded the company's reach, modernized operations, increased efficiency. Those achievements aren't in question. What concerns me is how you've done it. The corners cut, the trusts betrayed, the family bonds broken. The board meets tomorrow, Meredith reminded him. They'll want explanations for the financial discrepancies. They'll get them, Callum said, along with a plan to correct everything. But I need time. I reached into my ever-present handbag and withdrew another document. 3 months, I said, sliding it across the table. This outlines the timeline for unwinding the questionable arrangements, reinstating proper controls, and restructuring the company governance. Sign it now, and Meredith's articles remain unpublished. The board sees only the correction plan, not the reasons behind it. Isolde reached for the document, but Callum stopped her. It's not your decision, he said quietly. It never really was. He read through the pages slowly, his face unreadable. Finally, he looked up at me. You've thought of everything, haven't you? That's what mothers do, I replied. We think of everything because we have to protect everyone. even from themselves sometimes. He signed the document, his pen scratching, against the heavy paper like a confession. Meredith countersigned as witness, and I added my own signature with the Mont Blanc pen Matthias had given me on our silver anniversary. Receipt dated and filed, of course. "Wesley," I said, turning, "to my grandson. Would you show me what you've drawn?" He handed over his sketchbook somewhat reluctantly. The scene he'd captured was remarkable. All of us caught in this moment of transformation. Callum's defeat and determination, Isolde's barely contained fury, Meredith's watchful satisfaction, and me at the head of the table, serene but steel-spined, my handbag full of documentation within easy reach. "You've captured it perfectly," I told him. "The moment everything changed." "Not changed," Meredith corrected. "Returned to what it should have been all along. The grandfather clock in the hall, purchased in 1975, receipt in Volume 7 of my records, struck 9. Outside, darkness had fallen, but the garden lights illuminated the roses, their colors muted, but their shapes clear against the night sky. "Tomorrow," I said, standing, "we begin the real work. Callum, you'll meet with the board at 10. Meredith, you'll attend as both board member and compliance officer. Wesley, you're free to return to your studio. Your trust fund will be restored by the end of the week." "And me?" Isolde asked, her voice brittle. "What's my role in this family? Rehabilitation." I met her eyes steadily. "That depends on whether you choose to be part of the solution or remain part of the problem. The conditions apply to you too. Every gift, every asset, every advantage you've received through marriage into this family. Check your jewelry box carefully." She flinched slightly but said nothing more. Callum stood, helping her up with automatic courtesy. "Good night, Mother," he said. "I'll see you at the board meeting." "Good night, children," I replied. "And remember, I keep receipts for everything, even tonight's dinner." They filed out one by one. Callum and Isolde first, then Meredith with a knowing smile, finally Wesley clutching his sketchbook. I remained at the table looking at Matthias's empty chair, remembering all the dinners we'd shared here, all the lessons we'd tried to teach, all the preparations we'd made for a day we hoped would never come. My phone buzzed. A message from Beatrix. "Papers are ready for tomorrow. Finnegan has everything in order." "Good," I replied. The family dinner went as expected. Everyone knows their roles now. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden where my roses stood guard over decades of family history. Each bloom represented a moment, each careful record a shield against forgetfulness or betrayal. In protecting them, I had protected everything Matthias and I had built. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: board meetings, financial reckonings, family adjustments. But tonight, in this house that held so many memories, I had reminded my children of something crucial: that sometimes the quietest power is the most absolute, and that a mother's love, while unconditional, comes with very careful documentation. Touch the window glass, my reflection overlaying the garden beyond. "You were right, Matthias," I whispered. "Watching the books was the key to everything." In my handbag, decades of records waited like sleeping dragons, ready to protect or destroy. But tonight, they could rest. Tonight the roses would stand guard, and tomorrow we would begin again, one carefully documented step at a time. The morning of the board meeting dawned with the kind of crystalline clarity that seemed to mock the chaos about to unfold. I dressed carefully in a Chanel suit I'd purchased for Matthias's retirement party. Navy blue, impeccably tailored, with the pearl necklace he'd given me on our 50th anniversary. Every piece chosen for the message it would send. Stability, tradition, unshakable authority. The boardroom at Blackbriar Shipping's headquarters had changed little since I'd helped design it 30 years ago. The same mahogany table dominated the space, though the chairs had been updated to sleek leather affairs that Callum had insisted on. I arrived early, placing my documents at what had been Matthias's seat, now mine, as the majority shareholder, though few knew that yet. Board members filtered in slowly. Harrison Montgomery, who'd known Matthias since college. Elizabeth Chen Ross, our Asia-Pacific Operations Director. James Whitmore, Head of European Ventures. Each gave me curious looks. They'd never seen me at a board meeting before. I'd always worked behind the scenes, letting Matthias and then Callum take the spotlight, while I maintained the real power through careful documentation. Meredith arrived next, settling into her reinstated board seat, with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how much leverage she held. She'd dressed for battle too. A crisp white blazer over a black dress, her journalist's notebook prominently displayed. "Quite a turnout," she murmured to me. "Word must have gotten out." "People always sense when change is coming," I replied, watching as more members arrived. "They just don't usually know what kind." Callum entered last, his older conspicuously absent. He'd aged a decade in 24 hours, the weight of impending revelations visible in his stance. He took his seat at the opposite end of the table, not meeting anyone's eyes. "Before we begin," I said, standing before Callum could start his usual opening remarks, "there are some matters the board needs to address. Harrison, as our longest-serving member, would you chair this portion of the meeting?" Harrison looked startled but nodded. He'd been there when Matthias and I first took over the company, had watched us build it from a regional shipping line into an international corporation. He, more than anyone, would understand what was about to happen. "The floor is yours, Rosalind," he said formally. I opened my signature handbag, removing the first set of documents. "For the past 3 years," I began, "there have been certain irregularities in our financial reporting. Irregularities that, if exposed, could seriously damage this company's reputation and value." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Callum's face went pale, but he remained silent. "However," I continued, "these issues have been identified and a correction plan is already in place. What the board needs to understand is how these irregularities occurred, and more importantly, how they will be prevented in the future." I distributed copies of the correction plan, printed on our standard letterhead, each page watermarked and numbered. Everything documented, everything traceable. "Mrs. Blackbriar," Elizabeth Chen Ross interjected, "are you saying there's been fraud?" "I'm saying," I replied carefully, "that certain decisions were made that prioritized short-term gains over long-term stability. Decisions that are now being rectified." Meredith opened her notebook, her pen poised. The threat was clear. If the board didn't accept the correction plan, her exposé would destroy everything. "These decisions," Harrison said slowly, "they were made under whose authority?" All eyes turned to Callum. He straightened in his chair, summoning what dignity he could. "Under mine," he admitted, "but with the goal of expanding our market share and increasing shareholder value." "At what cost?" James Whitmore demanded. "If these irregularities are as serious as Mrs. Blackbriar suggests." "They're serious," Meredith cut in, "but not irreparable, if, and only if, we implement the correction plan immediately." I withdrew another document from my bag, the agreement Callum had signed at dinner. "My son has already agreed to the terms. full disclosure to appropriate regulatory bodies, supervised, unwinding of questionable arrangements, and a new governance structure to prevent future issues. And if we don't agree, Elizabeth asked, then I release everything to the press. Meredith said simply. Every document, every transaction, every manipulation. The company's stock will plummet, investigations will begin, and careers will end. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Board members exchanged glances, calculating personal risk against corporate stability. There's something else you should know, I added, producing the final document, the one I'd held in reserve for decades. According to the original company charter, which my husband and I had modified in 1975, the majority shareholding cannot be transferred without the approval of both founding members or their designated trustees. Callum's head snapped up. What? Your father designated me as his trustee before his death, which means, son, that your apparent majority control was never valid. I hold final authority over any major company decisions. The boardroom erupted again, but I continued calmly. I've allowed you to believe otherwise because I hoped you'd learn to lead responsibly. That hope proved optimistic. Harrison was studying the charter document, his expression shifting from shock to understanding. This is why Matthias was always so confident about the company's future, he said. He knew you were the final safeguard. Matthias and I built this company on two principles, I said, looking around the table. Financial acumen and family values. When one threatens to destroy the other, corrections must be made. And what corrections are you suggesting? James asked. I laid out the plan. Callum would remain CEO, but with oversight from a new compliance committee headed by Meredith. All major financial decisions would require board approval, not just notification. The overseas subsidiaries would be restructured for transparency, and a full audit would be conducted. Additionally, I added, Wesley Blackbriar's trust fund will be restored, and all attempts to leverage family assets for corporate use will cease immediately. The mansion, Elizabeth realized. That's what triggered this. The mansion was a symptom, I corrected. The disease was forgetting that business success means nothing if it destroys your family. Callum stood suddenly, his chair scraping back. You've orchestrated this perfectly, haven't you, Mother? Every detail planned, every outcome controlled, just like always. No, Callum. You orchestrated this the moment you decided that power was more important than principle. I simply documented everything, waiting to see if you'd remember what your father and I taught you. And when I didn't, then I did what any mother would do. I protected the family legacy, including you, though you may not see it that way yet. The board voted unanimously to accept the correction plan. They had no real choice. The alternatives were too devastating to contemplate. As they filed out, each paused to shake my hand, their expressions a mix of respect and wariness. They'd just discovered who really held the power at Blackbriar Shipping, and that knowledge would reshape everything. Meredith stayed behind, gathering her notes. That went better than expected, she observed. People generally choose survival when the alternative is destruction, I replied. Even proud men like your brother. Callum was still at the table staring at the documents that had undone 3 years of careful manipulation. Was any of it real? He asked suddenly. My authority, my control. Was it all just an illusion? Your authority came from your capabilities, I said. Your control came from our trust. One you earned, the other you lost. But both can be regained if you're willing to learn. Learn what? How to keep better records than you. How to hide things more carefully. No, I said softly. How to build something that lasts. Something bigger than profit margins and market share. Something worthy of the name. Blackbriar. He looked up then, and for a moment I saw Matthias in his face. The same determination, the same potential for greatness or destruction. And you'll be watching every step. With documentation, I agreed. Always with documentation. The ride home was quiet. Meredith focused on her phone as she coordinated with Finnegan about the next steps. The correction plan would take months to implement, years for its full effects to be felt. But we had time. I'd made sure of that decades. Dr. Wesley was in the garden when we arrived, painting the roses in the afternoon light. He'd captured their essence perfectly, not just their color and form, but their significance. Each bloom a testament to family history, each petal a page in our ongoing story. "How did it go?" he asked, not looking up from his canvas. "Your father is still CEO," Meredith answered, "but with new oversight and old wisdom to guide him. And grandmother's roses?" I smiled, touching a perfect white bloom. "Safe, like everything else I've protected all these years." Isolde was waiting in the foyer, her designer outfit slightly less perfect than usual. "I suppose you'll be wanting this back," she said, holding out the Cartier bracelet. "Keep it," I replied. "Consider it a reminder that everything has strings attached, even if they're not visible at first." She studied me with new respect. "You knew, didn't you? All along, you knew what Callum was doing with the company finances." "I knew everything. Every transaction, every manipulation, every attempt to consolidate power. I also knew that sometimes people need to fail before they can truly succeed. And now, what happens to us? To me?" "That depends on you," I said. "You're part of this family, for better or worse. The question is whether you want to be part of its redemption." She nodded slowly, touching the bracelet. "I'll think about it." "Do that," I advised. "And remember, I keep records of everything, including this conversation." The day ended as it had begun, with me in my study surrounded by documentation. But now the papers held new meaning, not just protection, but possibility. The possibility of redemption, of rebuilding, of remembering what really matters. My phone buzzed with a message from Callum. "The auditors want to start tomorrow. Will you help?" "Of course," I replied. "That's what mothers do." Another message, this one from Meredith. "Story killed, family saved. Not bad for a day's work." I smiled, thinking of all the days that had led to this one. Every receipt kept, every transaction recorded, every moment documented. A lifetime of preparation for a day I'd hoped would never come, but had always known might. Outside, Wesley had finished his painting. The roses glowed on the canvas, each one a chapter in our family's story. The white ones for birth, the pink for achievement, the red for love that endures, and running through it all, invisible but essential, the careful documentation that had saved everything worth saving. I opened my records, turning to the first page of a new volume. Blackbriar Family Reconstruction. I wrote at the top. Day 1. Because even now, especially now, everything must be documented. That's how legacies are protected, how families are preserved, how love proves stronger than power. 3 weeks into our family's reconstruction, I discovered something that changed everything. I was in my study late one night, reviewing decades of documentation for the ongoing audit, when I found a discrepancy that shouldn't have existed. A single receipt, dated the day before Matthias's death, for a safety deposit box I'd never known about. The receipt was in Matthias's handwriting, but it wasn't in my records. After 48 years of marriage, I thought I'd documented everything. This discovery sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the autumn wind rattling the windows. I waited until morning to call Finnegan O'Reilly. "Did you know about a safety deposit box at First Metropolitan?" I asked without preamble. His pause was a fraction too long. "Rosalind, I think you should come to my office." "What aren't you telling me, Finnegan?" "Not over the phone. Some things need to be discussed in person." I dressed carefully, choosing the gray silk suit I'd worn to Matthias's funeral. Something told me I'd need armor for whatever was coming. The drive to Finnegan's office gave me time to think, to review every conversation with Matthias in his final days. He'd been trying to tell me something about the books, about watching them carefully. I'd assumed it was about Callum's financial manipulations. But what if there was more? Finnegan's office was exactly as it had been for 30 years. Leather-bound law books, certificates on the walls, the subtle scent of expensive cigars. He stood as I entered, looking older than I remembered. "Before I show you anything," he said, "you need to understand that Matthias had his reasons." "Show me what?" He removed a thick envelope from his safe. This arrived the day after Matthias died, with instructions to wait until certain events occurred. Your confrontation with Callum over the company finances was one of those events. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside were documents, dozens of them. But these weren't the careful records I'd kept all these years. These were something else entirely. "Oh, Matthias," I whispered as I read. "What did you do?" The documents revealed a truth I'd never suspected. Matthias had been conducting his own secret audit for years. Not of Callum's activities, but of a deeper conspiracy within Blackbriar Shipping. A conspiracy that involved some of our oldest friends and business associates. "Harrison Montgomery," I said, reading the first name. "He's been embezzling for 20 years?" Finnegan nodded grimly. Through a network of shell companies so complex it took Matthias years to unravel it. Elizabeth Chen Ross is involved too, and James Whitmore. They've been siphoning funds since before Callum took over. But I checked everything. Every transaction. Every account. "They used your thoroughness as cover," Finnegan explained. "They knew you documented everything, so they created perfect paper trails. What you were recording was the sanitized version of their transactions. The real money went elsewhere." I thought of the board meeting 3 weeks ago. How easily they'd accepted the correction plan for Callum's irregularities. They'd been relieved, I now realized, not because we were saving the company, but because our focus on Callum had diverted attention from their own crimes. "How much?" I asked. "Conservative. Estimate. Over $200 million. The room seemed to tilt slightly. And Matthias knew. He discovered it about 5 years ago. He's been gathering evidence ever since, building an airtight case. But he knew if he moved too soon, they'd destroy the evidence, and probably the company with it. So he waited," I said, understanding dawning. He waited for Callum to make his move, knowing I would respond with documentation. The perfect distraction. While everyone was focused on the family drama, Matthias's real investigation could be completed. That's what's in the safety deposit box. The final proof, including offshore account numbers, transaction records, everything needed for a criminal prosecution. I closed my eyes, remembering Matthias's last words again. Watch the books, my love. He hadn't been warning me about Callum. He'd been telling me where to find the truth. Does Meredith know? No one knows except you and me. And now you have a decision to make. I opened my eyes, studying the documents that revealed decades of betrayal by people we'd trusted. People who'd sat at our dinner table, attended our children's weddings, been part of our lives for generations. If this comes out, I said slowly, it won't just destroy them. It'll devastate the company, everything we've built. Which is why Matthias left the decision to you. The evidence is there if you want to use it, or we handle it quietly. Force them out without public scandal. But that means they keep the money, Finnegan reminded me, and escape prosecution. I stood, walking to his window that overlooked the city Matthias and I had helped build. Somewhere, out there, Harrison Montgomery was probably at his desk, thinking he was safe now that the focus was on Callum's indiscretions. Elizabeth Chen Ross would be in her corner office, believing her secrets were secure. James Whitmore might be planning his next hidden transaction. Get me the safety deposit box key, I said finally, and call Meredith. It's time she knew what kind of story she's really sitting on. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. Meredith's investigative skills proved invaluable as we compiled everything into an actionable format. By the time I called an emergency board meeting, we had enough evidence to destroy not just careers, but lives. The boardroom felt different this time as they filed in. Harrison gave me his usual avuncular smile. Elizabeth nodded professionally. James straightened his tie nervously. They thought they were here to discuss the progress of Callum's correction plan. Callum arrived last, looking better than he had in weeks. The oversight committee was working. His relationship with Meredith was slowly mending, and even Isolde had begun to accept the new reality. Before we begin, I said, taking Matthias's old seat again, I want to share something my husband left for me. I opened my handbag, not the one with family records this time, but a new one containing Matthias's evidence. Harrison, how long have you known my family? He smiled fondly. Nearly 50 years now. Matthias and I were in college together, remember? Yes, I said softly. 50 years of friendship, 50 years of trust, 50 years of theft. The smile froze on his face. Beside him, Elizabeth's hand twitched toward her phone. Don't bother, Meredith said, anticipating her movement. The accounts are already frozen. What accounts? James asked, but his voice cracked on the question. I began laying out documents. Real ones this time, not the sanitized versions I'd been recording all these years. Matthias discovered your scheme 5 years ago. He spent his final years documenting everything. The shell companies, the hidden transfers, the offshore accounts. Rosalind, Harrison began. There's been some mistake. No mistake, Harrison. We have it all. Every transaction, every account, every betrayal. Elizabeth stood abruptly. This is absurd. I'm calling my lawyer. Sit down, I said, my voice cutting through her panic. Your lawyer can't help you now. None of them can. The only question is whether you want to end this quietly or publicly. Callum was watching the scene unfold with dawning comprehension. All these years, he said, while you were monitoring my activities. Your father was monitoring theirs. Your financial manipulations were serious, Callum, but they were clumsy, obvious. These people, these friends we trusted, they were much more sophisticated. We can explain. James started, but Meredith cut him off. Save it for the prosecutors, she said. Unless what? Harrison demanded. I removed the final document from my bag, a resignation letter, already prepared. Sign these, surrender the stolen funds, retire quietly. No prosecution. No public scandal. And if we refuse? Elizabeth's voice was steel now, her corporate mask firmly in place. Then my daughter publishes everything. Your careers end in disgrace. Your reputations are destroyed, and you spend the next decade in federal prison. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the city noise outside seemed muted, as if the world was holding its breath. Why? I asked finally. After everything we shared, everything we built together? Why? Harrison's shoulders slumped. It started small. A little creative accounting here, a hidden transaction there. By the time we realized how deep we were. It was too late to stop, Elizabeth finished. The money was too good, the system too perfect. Not perfect, I corrected. Matthias found you out. He just waited for the right moment to reveal it. Using me as cover, Callum said, understanding now. My mistakes were the distraction you needed. I nodded. Your father knew I would respond to your actions with documentation. While everyone was focused on that drama, his real evidence could be processed quietly. Brilliant, Meredith murmured, and heartbreaking. One by one, they signed the resignation letters. Harrison's hand shook as he wrote his name. 50 years of friendship ending in a single signature. Elizabeth remained composed, her corporate mask never slipping. James looked like he might be sick. The funds will be returned through a series of structured transactions, I explained. Your retirements will be announced as planned transitions. No one outside this room ever needs to know the truth. Why are you showing us this mercy? Elizabeth asked. Not mercy, I corrected. Pragmatism. A public scandal would destroy more than just you. It would damage everyone who works for Blackbriar. Shipping. Everyone who depends on us. I'm protecting the company, not you. They left quietly. Decades of power and privilege ending not with a bang, but with the soft click of the boardroom door. When they were gone, Callum turned to me. Did Dad know about my activities? Yes, I said gently. He knew everything, but he believed you could learn from your mistakes. These people, they were beyond redemption. Meredith was reviewing the evidence, her journalist's eye catching details we might have missed. This would have been the story of my career, she said wistfully. It still can be, I replied. Just not the way you expected. Write about the transition, about how Blackbriar shipping is evolving for the future. Tell a story of renewal, not destruction. Later that night, I sat in my study, surrounded by decades of documentation. My records had been perfect, meticulous, complete, and utterly misleading. While I'd been recording the surface of our business and family life, Matthias had been diving deep into its darkest corners. I opened my phone and typed out a message to the family group chat. Dinner tonight. All of us. Some things you need to know. Responses came quickly. Callum, I'll be there. Meredith, wouldn't miss it. Wesley, can I paint during? Isolde, should I bring wine? I smiled, thinking of how much had changed in just a few weeks. Then I opened a new ledger, a real one this time, and began to write the true history of Blackbriar shipping, as recorded by Rosalind Blackbriar. Because some stories need to be told, some truths need to be preserved, and some legacies are more complicated than they appear. Matthias had taught me that, in his final gift of truth. Outside, the roses swayed in the autumn wind. White for beginnings, pink for revelations, red for enduring love, and now they held new meaning. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the darkest secrets, and sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones we never see coming. The family dinner that night was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. As Wesley was setting up his easel by the window, and Meredith was arranging her notes about the day's revelations, our elderly housekeeper, Mrs. Graves, appeared in the doorway looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Ma'am," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "There's someone here to see you. She says she's Mr. Matthias's daughter." The room went absolutely still. Callum's fork clattered against his plate, and Isolde's perfect posture became rigid. Meredith's journalist instincts visibly kicked in as she reached for her notebook. "That's impossible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I remembered something. A strange receipt in Matthias's hidden documents, regular payments to an account I'd never been able to trace. "She has documentation," Mrs. Graves continued. "And she looks like him, ma'am. Like Mr. Matthias when he was younger." I stood slowly, smoothing my skirt with hands that refused to tremble. "Show her in." The woman who entered the dining room was around 50, with Matthias's steel-gray eyes and characteristic way of holding herself. She carried a leather portfolio that reminded me painfully of his own. "My name is Victoria Blackbriar Hayes," she said without preamble. "And I think you've all been wondering about those quarterly payments to the Cayman Islands account." Meredith's pen scratched against paper. Callum half rose from his chair, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Sit down," I said quietly. "All of you." I turned to our visitor. "You have proof of this claim?" She opened her portfolio and withdrew a stack of documents. Birth certificate, DNA test results, photographs, and decades of correspondence with Matthias. "He never told you," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "He protected you from this truth, just as he protected me from the complications of his public life." I took the documents with steady hands, years of practice allowing me to maintain composure while my world tilted on its axis. The birth certificate was dated 3 years before I met Matthias. The DNA test was recent, conducted just months before his death. "The payments," I said, understanding now. "They weren't part of the embezzlement scheme. They were support payments," Victoria confirmed. "Though he gave me far more than money. He gave me an education, opportunities, a chance to build my own life away from the complications of the Blackbriar name." Wesley had abandoned his easel and moved closer, studying Victoria's face with an artist's eye. "You have grandfather's expressions," he said softly. "The way you tilt your head when you're waiting for someone to understand something." She smiled. Matthias's smile, I realized with a pang. "He said the same thing when we first met in person, 15 years ago." 15 years! Callum's voice cracked. "He's known you for 15 years and never told us?" "He had his reasons," Victoria said, taking a seat at the table without waiting for an invitation. "The same reasons he kept evidence of the embezzlement scheme. The same reasons he documented everything, but kept certain truths hidden. He was protecting all of us, in his own way." I looked down at the photographs. Matthias with a young Victoria, at her college graduation, at her wedding, with her children. All these moments that had happened parallel to our family life, documented with the same care he'd taught me to use. "Why now?" Meredith asked, her reporter's instincts cutting to the heart of it. "Why come forward after he's gone?" Victoria withdrew one final document from her portfolio. "Because of this. Dad's last letter to me, delivered by his lawyers last week. He said to wait until the company's situation was resolved, until you discovered the truth about Harrison and the others. He said you'd need this information for what comes next. What comes next? I echoed. The real reason for the embezzlement, she said. It wasn't just about money. Harrison and the others were funding something specific. Something Dad discovered but couldn't stop without destroying everything. She laid out another set of documents, these bearing the letterhead of a company I'd never heard of, Genesis Maritime Technologies. They were developing autonomous shipping technology, Victoria explained. AI-driven vessels that could eliminate the need for crews. But the testing was rushed, dangerous. There were accidents, deaths that were covered up. Dad found out, but by then the technology was too integrated into Blackbriar's systems. Callum leaned forward, his face pale. The new navigation systems we've been installing across the fleet are the first phase, Victoria confirmed. Harrison and the others weren't just stealing money. They were using Blackbriar as a testing ground for technology that isn't ready, that isn't safe. I thought of all the ships in our fleet, all the crews who trusted us with their lives. How long do we have? The full automation is scheduled to go live in 72 hours. When it does... She trailed off, letting us imagine the consequences. Meredith was already on her phone, her fingers flying over the keys. I'm calling my tech contacts. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. I have that information too, Victoria said. Dad made sure I understood everything before he died. He knew my background in maritime law would be crucial for what's coming. I studied her face. This stranger who was also family. This secret my husband had kept even while teaching me the importance of documentation. You're sure about this? About all of it? I've spent 15 years earning degrees in maritime law and technology ethics, all funded by those Cayman Islands payments. Dad didn't just support me. He was preparing me, preparing all of us in different ways. Wesley had returned to his easel, but now he was sketching Victoria, capturing the familiar angles of her face, the way she held herself like her father. Isolde sat silent, watching everything with calculating eyes, while Callum seemed lost in thought. We need a plan, I said finally. We have 72 hours to prevent a catastrophe that could destroy not just our company, but countless lives. Need to shut down the system before it goes fully autonomous, Callum said, snapping into focus. But if we do it openly, Harrison and the others will know we've discovered everything. They might anyway, Meredith pointed out. They'll be watching us after today's resignations. Then we need a distraction, Isolde said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. What? I know something about misdirection. I smiled despite myself. Yes, you certainly do. What did you have in mind? The Autumn Charity Gala, she said. It's tomorrow night. Everyone who matters in shipping will be there, including Harrison and the others. If they're watching us, let's give them something to watch. A very public family drama, Meredith caught on. Something to keep their attention while we deal with the real threat. But what about the ships? Wesley asked. The crews? I have contacts, Victoria said. People who can help us shut down the autonomous systems safely, ship by ship. But we'll need access to the main servers, which are in the secure data center, Callum added, where I no longer have unrestricted access, thanks to the new oversight protocols. All eyes turned to me. I opened my ever-present handbag and withdrew my master access card, the one even Callum hadn't known about. Matthias wasn't the only one who kept secrets, I said quietly. The next hour was spent in intense planning. Meredith would use her journalistic contacts to track Harrison and the others. Callum and Victoria would work on the technical details of shutting down the autonomous systems. Wesley would help Isolde plan the perfect public scandal for the gala. And I had my own role to play. "Mrs. Blackbriar," Victoria said, as the others dispersed to their tasks. I know this must be difficult for you." I looked at this woman, who had my husband's eyes, who carried his secrets, who might be our best hope for saving everything we'd built. "Call me Rosalind," I said. "And yes, it is difficult, but necessary things often are." She smiled, that familiar smile again. "He said you'd say something like that. He said you'd understand eventually why he kept me secret. Not to hurt you, but to protect everyone. By giving us each exactly what we needed to face this moment," I realized. Me with my documentation, Callum with his business skills, Meredith with her investigations, even Isolde with her talent for drama, and you with my specific education and expertise, she finished. "Dad played a very long game." "He always did," I said softly, "even when I thought I was the one keeping all the records." I went to my study after Victoria left, needing a moment alone with the ghosts of my certainties. The records I'd kept so meticulously all these years suddenly seemed incomplete, like a book with crucial chapters missing. My phone buzzed with messages. "Meredith, Harrison booked a private jet for tomorrow night after the gala. Too late to stop him." Callum, "Victoria's contacts confirmed the autonomous system details. It's worse than we thought." Wesley, "Started sketches for the gala scene. Isolde has some wild ideas." Isolde, "Trust me on this. I know how to create a spectacle." Victoria, "Dad's last letter mentioned a backup plan. Meeting tomorrow to discuss?" I looked at my reflection in the window. The woman who thought she knew everything, because she documented everything. How would she handle discovering she was part of a larger plan, one even her perfect records hadn't revealed? But then I remembered something Matthias used to say. "Life isn't about having all the answers, love. It's about knowing where to find them, when you need them." I opened a new document on my computer and began to type. "The true legacy of Matthias Blackbriar, a record of secrets, sacrifice, and salvation." Because some stories need more than one narrator, some truths require multiple perspectives, and some legacies are greater than we ever imagined. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. A public scandal to orchestrate, a hidden threat to neutralize, a family legacy to protect in ways I'd never anticipated. But tonight I had records to update, plans to document, and a daughter-in-law's talent for drama to unleash. The roses outside my window swayed in the evening breeze, their colors muted in the gathering darkness, white for secrets revealed, pink for battles ahead, red for love that transcends betrayal. And now, perhaps, a new variety to plant, something that would bloom in shades of gray, like Matthias's eyes looking back at me from Victoria's face. The Blackbriar Shipping Annual Autumn. Gala had always been a masterpiece of orchestrated elegance, but tonight's event would be a performance unlike any other. I chose my outfit carefully. A deep burgundy Valentino gown that Matthias had given me for our last anniversary, accessorized not with my usual pearls, but with a diamond necklace that held a hidden microphone. Isolde had outdone herself with the preparations. The grand ballroom of the Blackbriar Hotel glittered with autumn-themed decorations, each table setting perfect, each detail calculated for maximum impact. The guest list was a who's who of the shipping industry, including, of course, Our recently retired board members. Everything's in place," Meredith murmured as she passed me, stunning in a midnight blue gown that concealed various recording devices. "Victoria's team is standing by at the data center," I nodded slightly, watching as Harrison Montgomery made his entrance, still carrying himself with the confidence of a man who thought he had escaped justice. Elizabeth Chen Ross arrived moments later, her smile brittle but determined. James Whitmore was already at the bar, drinking more quickly than usual. Callum and Isolde arrived fashionably late, playing their roles perfectly. She'd chosen a daring, red dress that guaranteed attention, while he wore his father's favorite tuxedo, a detail that wouldn't go unnoticed by our targets. Wesley had positioned himself near the orchestra, his artist's eye capturing every detail in quick sketches that would later serve as evidence if needed. And somewhere in the hotel's secure basement, Victoria was preparing to access the servers that controlled our fleet's autonomous systems. "Quite a turnout," Harrison said, approaching me with a glass of champagne. Though, I must say, I was surprised to receive an invitation after my retirement. "You've been part of this family for 50 years, Harrison," I replied, accepting the glass. "Did you think I'd exclude you from our celebrations?" His smile faltered slightly. "About that, Rosalind. I hope you understand that what happened was business," I finished for him. "Just business. Though I wonder." I glanced at my watch. Exactly 48 hours until the autonomous systems would activate. "I wonder if there's more business we should discuss." Before he could respond, Isolde's voice cut through the crowd. "You bastard! How could you?" All heads turned to where she stood confronting Callum, her voice carrying perfectly across the ballroom. We'd rehearsed this moment for hours, but her performance was flawless. "Darling, please," Callum said, his own role equally convincing. "This isn't the place." "When is the place?" she demanded. "When the company is ruined? When everything we've built is destroyed by your secrets?" I saw Harrison stiffen beside me. Elizabeth across the room was already moving toward the exit, but Meredith smoothly intercepted her. "What an unfortunate scene," Harrison murmured. "Perhaps we should step outside." "Oh no," I said softly. "I think we need to stay for this. After all, family drama can be so revealing." The next part of our performance unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Isolde threw her drink in Callum's face. He responded by accusing her of corporate espionage. She countered by threatening to expose everything she knew about the company's operations. "You don't know anything," Callum sneered, playing his part perfectly. "Don't I?" Isolde's voice dropped to a carrying whisper. "I know about the autonomous systems. I know about Genesis Maritime Technologies. I know about the accidents." Harrison's glass shattered on the marble floor. James Whitmore stumbled against the bar. Elizabeth froze in her tracks. My phone buzzed silently. Victoria's signal that she'd gained access to the servers. Now we just had to keep everyone distracted for the next 30 minutes while she and her team disabled the autonomous protocols. "Perhaps," I said loudly, "we should take this discussion somewhere private. Harrison, Elizabeth, James. Would you join us? As former board members, your insight might be valuable." They had no choice but to agree. To refuse would be suspicious, especially with dozens of industry leaders watching. We moved to one of the hotel's private conference rooms, leaving the gala buzzing with speculation. As soon as the doors closed, the act dropped. Isolde stepped away from Callum, smoothing her dress. Meredith positioned herself by the door while Wesley quietly began sketching the scene from a corner. "Well played," I said to Isolde. You missed your calling in theater." "What is this?" Harrison demanded. "What game are you playing, Rosalind?" "No game, Harrison. Just the final act of a play that began long before any of us knew we were in it." I removed a tablet from my evening bag and pulled up the schematics for the autonomous shipping system. "Shall we discuss the real reason for all that embezzled money?" Elizabeth's composure cracked first. "You can't prove anything. The system's illegal tested." "Tested?" Meredith interrupted. "Like they were tested on the Aurora Dawn last year? Before the accident that killed 12 crew members?" "James," Whitmore sank into a chair, his face ashen. "How did you—" "My father knew everything," a new voice said. Victoria entered from a side door, still wearing the technician's uniform she'd used to access the servers. "He just waited for the right moment to reveal it." Harrison's face went through a remarkable series of expressions as he looked at Victoria. You look like Matthias," I finished. "Yes, she does. Another secret you didn't know about, Harrison. My husband was very good at keeping things hidden when he needed to. The autonomous systems have been disabled," Victoria reported. "All ships are returning to manual control protocols. The evidence of the failed tests and covered-up accidents has been secured." "You have no right," Elizabeth began. But I cut her off. "We have every right. This isn't just about the money you stole. This is about lives. The crews you endangered. The families you put at risk. All for the sake of rushing an unsafe technology to market." "The technology works," Harrison insisted. "A few accidents are statistically—" "A few accidents?" Callum's voice was ice. "Show them, Victoria." She projected a series of images onto the conference room wall. Wreckage, bodies, grieving families, all carefully hidden from public view, all documented in Matthias's secret files. 27 deaths, Victoria said quietly. Not counting the near misses and injuries, all covered up, all dismissed as human error or equipment failure. "The system would have been perfected," Elizabeth argued. "Another year of testing." "Testing on unsuspecting crews," Meredith finished. "On people who trusted us with their lives." I stood, smoothing my gown. "Here's what's going to happen. In addition to returning the embezzled funds, you're going to provide complete documentation of every test, every accident, every cover-up. Victoria's team of maritime law experts will ensure proper compensation for all affected families." "And if we refuse?" Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. Meredith held up her phone. "Then my exposé goes live at midnight, complete with evidence of the embezzlement, the technical failures, and the deaths you tried to hide. Your choice." The next hour was spent in detailed negotiations, with Victoria's legal expertise proving invaluable. By the time we returned to the gala, everything was in place. Signed confessions, agreement to cooperate with investigations, and a complete shutdown of the autonomous shipping program. The party was still in full swing, the guests unaware of the drama that had unfolded behind closed doors. Isolde and Callum put on one final performance, a public reconciliation that would explain their earlier scene. "Mother," Callum said as we watched the last guest depart, "did you know? About Victoria? About all of it?" "No," I admitted. "Your father kept some secrets even from me. But he made sure we'd all have what we needed when the time came to act." "The perfect planner," Meredith mused. "Right to the end." Wesley was putting the finishing touches on his sketches. Visual documentation of a night that would change everything. Isolde had already begun planning how to spin the story of the retired board members to protect the company's reputation. Victoria approached me as the cleanup crew began their work. "There's one more thing," she said, holding out an envelope. "Dad left this for you, to be delivered after everything was resolved." My hands trembled slightly as I opened it, recognizing Matthias's handwriting. "My dearest Rosalind, if you're reading this, then everything has happened, as I hoped it would. Victoria has revealed herself, the autonomous system has been stopped, and our family, all of it, has come together to protect what matters most. I'm sorry for keeping secrets from you, my love. Each one was a weight on my heart, but necessary for what had to be done. Victoria was my past mistake, but also my chance to prepare for the future. Every payment, every decision, every hidden document was part of ensuring our legacy would be protected. You taught me the importance of documentation, of keeping perfect records. I learned from you. Used those lessons to build my own case against those who would have destroyed everything we built. But you taught me something even more important, that family is worth any sacrifice, any deception, if it means protecting what matters. Take care of our children, all of them. Let Victoria help guide the company's future. She has the knowledge and ethics we'll need. Let Meredith tell the stories that need telling. Let Callum learn from his mistakes and grow stronger. Let Wesley create beauty from all of this. And you, my love, keep keeping records. But remember that sometimes the most important things can't be documented. They can only be felt. All my love, Matthias. I folded the letter carefully, adding it to my evening bag alongside decades of other precious documents. Around me, my family, expanded now in unexpected ways, was already planning next steps, future strategies, new beginnings. Wesley had started a new sketch, this one showing all of us together. Callum and Isolde, their public drama turned to real understanding. Meredith, her journalist's instincts now serving a greater purpose. Victoria, carrying her father's legacy in more ways than one. And me, still documenting, still protecting, still learning that some records are written, not on paper but on the heart. The roses would need new markers, I thought. New blooms to commemorate this night, this revelation, this expansion of everything we thought we knew about family and legacy. Sometimes the truest documentation isn't what we write down, but what we pass on to those who come after us. And sometimes the most important records are the ones we keep in our hearts. 1 year later, I stood in the gardens of Blackbriar Manor, surrounded by blooming roses and family, both old and new. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of change and renewal. Wesley was setting up his easel, preparing to capture the scene. Our first official family portrait since everything had changed. The past year had transformed Blackbriar shipping in ways none of us could have predicted. Victoria's legal expertise had guided us through the complex process of compensating the families affected by the autonomous system accidents. Meredith's carefully crafted series of articles about corporate responsibility and family legacy had won her a Pulitzer. Callum, with his sister's oversight, had rebuilt the company's reputation on a foundation of transparency and ethical innovation. And I had learned that some things are more important than perfect documentation. "Mother," Victoria called, approaching, with a leather-bound volume. "I found something in Dad's old office that you should see." The book was weathered, its pages filled with Matthias's distinctive handwriting. But these weren't business records or secret investigations. These were personal notes, observations about his family, all of us, spanning decades. "He documented everything too," Victoria said softly. "Just differently than you did." I opened to a random page dated the day Callum took over as CEO. Watched my son step into my shoes today. Rosalind thinks he's not ready, and perhaps she's right. But sometimes we need to fall before we can truly learn to stand. She'll watch him, guide him with her perfect records and careful documentation, and when the time comes, she'll help him understand what really matters. Another entry from the day he first met Victoria's children. My grandchildren from 2 lives, all carrying pieces of our family's story. Wesley sees the world through an artist's eyes, just like Victoria did at his age. Sometimes the truth is better captured in pictures than in words or numbers. And then, near the end, just days before his death, the pieces are in place. Harrison and the others think they've hidden their tracks, but they've forgotten who taught them about documentation in the first place. Rosalind's records will provide the foundation, Victoria's expertise the framework, Meredith's investigations the catalyst. Callum will learn, Isolde will grow, Wesley will witness, and somehow, from all these separate threads, a stronger fabric will emerge. He planned everything, I murmured, touching the pages gently. Not everything. Victoria smiled. He couldn't have planned how we'd all come together, how we'd become a real family. She was right. The past year had brought changes no one could have documented in advance. Isolde had discovered a talent for crisis management, turning her social skills to rebuilding trust with our business partners. Wesley's paintings of our family's transformation had become an acclaimed series, telling our story through art in a way no records could capture. "Everyone's ready," Meredith called from the garden. "The light's perfect." We gathered among the roses, old and new varieties, each marking a moment in our expanding family history. Callum stood tall, his arm around Isolde, both of them finally comfortable in their transformed roles. Meredith positioned herself beside Victoria, the sisters-in-law who'd formed an unexpected bond. Wesley set up the camera timer before joining us, his artist's eye ensuring the composition was perfect. But before the shutter clicked, I had one last surprise to share. "Before we take this picture," I said, opening my ever-present handbag, "there's something you should all see." I withdrew a document, not one of my usual records, but something new, something different. "What is it?" Callum asked. "The new Blackbriar family charter," I explained. "Not a legal document, not a business record, but a promise, a commitment to what matters most." They gathered closer as I read. "We, the Blackbriar family, acknowledge that our strength lies not in our wealth, our power, or our position, but in our connection to each other. We commit to honoring the truth, even when it's complicated, supporting each other's dreams, even when they differ from tradition, protecting our legacy by protecting each other. Understanding that family is not just blood, but choice. Remembering that the most important records are the ones we write on each other's hearts, Mother," Meredith said softly. "Is this replacing your usual documentation?" "No," I smiled. "It's complementing it. Your father taught me that some things can't be captured in ledgers and receipts. Some things need a different kind of record." Victoria touched the charter gently. "He would have loved this." "He inspired it," I said. "His secret record showed me that documentation isn't just about facts and figures. It's about capturing moments, understanding motivations, preserving what matters most." Wesley had already started sketching, capturing our reactions to this new kind of family record. Isolde was wiping away unexpected tears, while Callum stood straighter, as if accepting a new kind of responsibility. "Sign it," I said, holding out a pen, Matthias's favorite Mont Blanc. Not as business people, not as heirs, but as family, one. By one they signed. Callum and Isolde, Meredith, Victoria, Wesley. I signed last. Not at the top as I usually did with documents, but alongside everyone else. Now, I said, returning to our portrait position. Let's document this moment properly. The camera clicked, capturing us among the roses. The white ones for new beginnings, the pink for revelations, the red for enduring love, and the new variety we'd planted in Matthias's memory. A unique shade of steel gray, like his eyes looking out from so many faces in our expanded family. Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner in the same room where so many revelations had unfolded, I made one final addition to my records. Not in my usual ledgers, but in a new book, bound in soft leather that matched the roses outside. The true measure of a family's wealth isn't in its bank accounts or business success. It's in the way we hold each other up, the way we face challenges, together, the way we embrace new chapters and welcome new members. Matthias understood this. He kept his own records, not of transactions and assets, but of moments and meanings. Today we created a new kind of documentation, not of what we own, but of who we are, not of what we've built, but of what we mean to each other. I am Rosalind, Blackbriar, and this is my final record as the keeper of our family's history. From now on, we will all be record keepers, each in our own way. Callum, documenting our business evolution with newfound wisdom. Meredith, telling our stories with truth and compassion. Victoria, preserving our legal and ethical legacy. Wesley, capturing our moments in art and color. Isolde, transforming our public face with genuine grace. And me, I'll keep my records, my receipts, my careful documentation. But I'll also keep this new book, filled not with numbers and dates, but with moments and meanings. Because sometimes the most important things to document are the things that can't be measured. The way Callum now calls Victoria sister, without hesitation. The sound of Meredith's laugh when she's truly happy. The look in Wesley's eyes when he's capturing something perfect. The softening of Isolde's sharp edges into real warmth. The echo of Matthias's wisdom in all of us. These are the records that matter most. These are the legacies worth preserving. And so, with roses blooming outside and family gathered within, we begin a new chapter. One where documentation means more than paper trails, where legacy means more than inheritance, and where family means more than blood. This is our story. All of us. Together. Signed, Rosalind Blackbriar. Keeper of records, protector of legacy, mother to many. The roses swayed in the evening breeze, their petals catching the last light of day. Inside, my family, expanded, transformed, strengthened, continued, their dinner, their voices mixing in the warm air. Wesley was sketching again. Meredith was taking notes. Victoria was explaining a legal concept to Callum while Isolde actually listened. I closed my new record book, running my fingers over its soft cover. Tomorrow I would return to my usual documentation. Receipts and records, transactions and trails. But tonight I simply watched my family, remembering Matthias's words from his final letter. Sometimes the most important things can't be documented. They can only be felt. He was right, of course. He usually was. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to capture these moments, these feelings, these transformations. We just need to find new ways to record them, new ways to remember, new ways to pass them on. Because in the end, the greatest legacy isn't what we leave in our ledgers, but what we leave in our hearts. I am Rosalind Blackbriar, and this is how our family story continues, documented not just in ink and paper, but in love and memory, in art and story, in truth and transformation. And somewhere, I know, Matthias is smiling, watching his greatest plan unfold exactly as he hoped it would. Not in the perfection of execution, but in the beauty of unexpected connections and the strength of renewed bonds. The roses will bloom again next spring, and we'll add new varieties for new chapters in our story. But for now, we simply sit together, family old and new, creating records that no ledger could ever capture. This is our legacy. This is our truth. This is our family. And every moment is worth documenting, in all the ways that matter most. 5 years later, the library at Blackbriar Manor was bathed in late afternoon sunlight as I carefully placed the last leather-bound volume on the newly installed shelves. These weren't my usual business records. Those were safely preserved in the company archives. These were different. 5 years of our family's transformation, documented in ways Matthias would have appreciated. Grandmother? Wesley stood in the doorway, now 34, and a renowned artist. His latest exhibition, Legacy in Bloom, had transformed our family's story into a series of paintings that captured what mere documents never could. "They're waiting in the garden," I smiled, touching the spine of the final volume. "The roses, blooming perfectly. Victoria says the new hybrid is ready for its official naming. The new hybrid. A unique blend of the steel gray varieties we'd planted in Matthias's memory and the deep burgundy that marked our family's transformation. 5 years of careful cultivation, documented not just in my records but in Wesley's, sketches, and Victoria's scientific notes. Outside, the garden had evolved just as our family had. The original roses still stood guard, white for beginnings, pink for revelations, red for enduring love. But now they were joined by newer varieties, each marking another chapter in our expanding story. The family gathered around the central fountain, where the newest roses bloomed. Callum, his corporate armor softened by 5 years of genuine growth, stood with Isolde, who had transformed her social skills into a successful corporate ethics consulting practice. Their daughter, Rose Matthias Blackbriar, aged 3, played among the flower beds under the watchful eye of her half-brother, Wesley. Meredith, fresh from accepting her second Pulitzer for investigative journalism, was recording the moment on her ever-present phone. Her series on corporate transformation, inspired by our family's journey, had changed how businesses approached legacy and ethics. Victoria, now our company's chief ethics officer and legal counsel, had brought her own children. Matthias's other, grandchildren, now fully integrated into the Blackbriar fold. They carried their grandfather's eyes and their mother's determination to protect what matters most. "Should we begin?" I asked, opening a new leather-bound book, the first volume of our next 5 years. Callum nodded, lifting little Rose into his arms. "The honor should be yours, Mother. You've documented every other important moment." I stepped forward, touching the perfect blooms of the new hybrid. "In honor of transformation, of secrets revealed, of family expanded and strengthened, we name this variety Matthias's Truth. May it remind us always that the most important records are the ones we write with love." Wesley was already sketching, capturing the moment when the setting sun hit the petals, turning them into a blend of steel and fire. Meredith's camera clicked softly, while Victoria's children placed small, handwritten notes at the base of the bush, their own way of documenting the moment. "I have something to share," I said, retrieving an envelope from my ever-present handbag. "One final record from your father." They gathered closer as I opened the letter, the last one dated just days before his death, which his lawyers had been instructed to hold until this exact moment. My dearest family, if Rosalind is reading this, then 5 years have passed since our greatest transformation began. The autonomous system threat was stopped. The truth about Victoria emerged, and our family expanded in ways that only love can measure. I've watched you all from whatever comes after this life, seeing how you've grown. Callum, you've learned that true strength lies not in control, but in connection. Meredith, you've turned truth-telling into an art that changes lives. Victoria, you've stepped fully into your birthright, while helping others protect theirs. Wesley, you've shown us all how to see beauty in complexity. Isolde, you've discovered that real influence comes from genuine care. And Rosalind, my love, you've learned that some records are written in hearts rather than books. The roses I helped plan, yes, even the new hybrid you're naming today, are my final gift to you all. Each variety carries a piece of our story, a fragment of our truth, a hope for our future. Keep documenting, keep growing, keep transforming, but most of all, keep loving. All my love. Matthias. Little Rose reached out to touch the letter, her small fingers tracing her grandfather's signature. "More stories, Grandma?" she asked, her eyes, Matthias's eyes, bright with curiosity. "Always more stories," I promised, lifting her into my arms. "Would you like to help me make today's record?" She nodded eagerly, and together we walked to the library, followed by the family. In the warm light of sunset, I opened the new volume and began to write. Today we named a rose and remembered a truth. That family is both what we're given and what we choose. That legacy is both what we inherit and what we create. That documentation is both what we write and what we live. The past 5 years have brought changes even my careful records couldn't have predicted. Callum's leadership of Blackbriar Shipping has become a case study in ethical corporate transformation. Meredith's journalism has inspired a movement toward the transparent business practices. Victoria's legal expertise has helped other families navigate complex legacies. Wesley's art has shown us new ways to document our journey. Isolde's growth has proven that true change comes from the heart, and I have learned that the best records are kept in moments like these. The roses bloom, the family grows, the story continues, and somewhere, Matthias watches, knowing his greatest plan succeeded not because of perfect execution, but because of imperfect love. Witnessed and recorded by Rosalind Blackbriar and Rose Matthias Blackbriar, age 3, who added her own mark, in crayon below. Little Rose carefully drew a flower, more of a happy scribble, really, at the bottom of the page. One by one, the family added their own marks. Callum's precise signature, Meredith's journalist scrawl, Victoria's legal flourish, Wesley's artistic swirl, Isolde's elegant script. As the sun set, casting long shadows through the library windows, I added one final note. Some legacies are written in ledgers, some in letters, some in love. The truest documentation captures all three. We are the Blackbriar family, expanded, transformed, strengthened by truth and time. Our records now live in the roses that mark our moments, the art that captures our growth, the stories that share our truth, the laws that protect our values, the love that binds us together, and in the eyes of a 3-year-old girl who carries her grandfather's gaze and her family's future. This is not an ending but a continuation. Not a final record but a living document. Not just a family history but a family becoming. With love and documentation, Rosalind Blackbriar, keeper of records, teller of truths, mother of many. Later that night, after the family had gone home, and the roses glowed softly under the garden lights, I stood in my study one last time. The shelves were lined with decades of records, business ledgers, personal notes, family documents, but my eyes were drawn to the new volumes, the ones that captured what numbers never could. My phone buzzed with messages from the family. Callum, thank you for teaching us the true meaning of documentation. Meredith, working on a piece about legacy. You've given me the perfect ending. Victoria, Dad would be so proud of what we've become. Wesley, started a new painting. It's all of us, surrounded by every rose we've ever planted. Isolde, Rose is already asking for more stories. Your legacy lives on. I smiled, thinking of all the records yet to be written, all the moments yet to be documented, all the love yet to be measured in blooming roses and family gatherings. Opening my window, I let in the night air, heavy with the scent of Matthias's truth roses. Their petals gleamed like captured starlight, a perfect blend of steel and fire, just like the family they represented. You were right, my love, I whispered to Matthias's memory. The most important records are the ones we write. With love, I am Rosalind Blackbriar, and this is not the end of our story. It's simply the beginning of a new volume, waiting to be filled with moments that matter, truths that transform, and love that leaves its mark on every page. The roses will bloom again tomorrow, and we'll be here to document every petal, every moment, every truth, together, as family, forever. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.